Liam continued, his voice steady and unwavering. For months, my team at Apex Holdings has been conducting an independent audit of Vance Enterprises, prompted by certain irregularities we observed. We have uncovered a systematic campaign of corporate espionage and financial manipulation, orchestrated by you, Mr. Thorne, to deliberately devalue Vance Enterprises and facilitate this hostile takeover. Alara braced herself, expecting the usual litany of financial woes, the grim prognosis she had grown accustomed to, but what followed was a blow that stole the very breath from her lungs. He tapped the tablet, and a complex array of charts, figures, and damning evidence flashed onto the large screen at the front of the boardroom. These documents, Liam explained, pointing to specific data points, detail your shell corporations, your illicit transactions, and your network of informants within Vance Enterprises, all designed to bleed the company dry and force the Vance family into this desperate position. There is one path left, Evelyn continued, her eyes fixed on Alara. One ancient pact, long forgotten, that now presents itself as our only salvation. It involves you, my dear. Thorne's face turned ashen. He lunged for the tablet, but Liam calmly pulled it back. I also have here, Liam continued, producing another set of documents from his briefcase. A counter-offer. Apex Holdings is prepared to acquire a controlling stake in Vance Enterprises, injecting immediate capital, restructuring its debts, and revitalizing its core businesses. This offer is not only significantly more favorable than Mr. Thorne's, but it also comes with a commitment to preserve the Vance legacy and its workforce. Alara felt a cold dread creep up her spine. Me, what are you talking about, grandmother? He pushed the documents across the table towards Arthur Vance, who stared at them with trembling hands. A marriage, Evelyn stated, her voice devoid of emotion, to a man of my choosing, a humble car mechanic by the name of Liam O'Connell. This is a lie, Thorne roared, his composure finally shattering. A desperate fabrication. The words struck Alara like a physical blow. A mechanic, her the last Vance heiress, reduced to marrying a man whose hands were likely perpetually stained with oil, whose world was grease and gears, not boardrooms and balance sheets. Her mind reeled, images of her carefully curated future shattering into a million pieces. Is it, Liam countered, a cold smile touching his lips. The authorities, Mr. Thorne, will be very interested in reviewing this evidence. They're already on their way. No, Alara gasped, her voice raw with disbelief and outrage. You can't be serious. This is impossible. I won't do it. My life, my future, my dreams. You can't just barter them away. Just then, the distant wail of sirens pierced the air, growing louder with each passing second. Thorne's eyes darted frantically towards the window, then back to Liam, a look of pure terror on his face. The boardroom erupted into a cacophony of whispers and gasps. Alara, still reeling from the shock, watched Liam, her mind struggling to reconcile the unassuming mechanic with this powerful, brilliant strategist who had just, in a single, breathtaking moment, saved her family from ruin. The revelation was a whirlwind of shock, confusion, and a strange, nascent sense of awe. The boardroom, moments ago a chamber of despair, now buzzed with a chaotic mixture of relief, astonishment, and frantic whispers. Victor Thorne, his face a mask of pure panic, was being escorted out by two stern-faced officers, the wail of sirens growing louder as they approached the building. His protests were futile, his power stripped away in a single, breathtaking moment. Evelyn's gaze hardened. Your dreams, Alara, are a luxury we can no longer afford. This is not a suggestion. It is an ultimatum. Marry Liam O'Connell, and a substantial inheritance, tied to this very pact, will be unlocked. An inheritance that will not only save Vance Enterprises from utter collapse, but will also ensure your family's future. Refuse, and everything we have, everything your ancestors built, will be lost forever, ruined. You will be left with nothing but a name that carries the stench of failure. Alara, however, remained rooted to the spot, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions swirling within her. Shock, raw and visceral, was the dominant sensation. Liam, the quiet, unassuming mechanic she had married, the man whose hands she had seen stained with grease, was the CEO of Apex Holdings, a global powerhouse. It was a truth so outlandish, so utterly improbable that her mind struggled to process it. The weight of her grandmother's words pressed down on Alara, suffocating her. The image of her parents, worn and defeated, flashed before her eyes. The crumbling manor, the whispers of bankruptcy, the legacy she had always felt burdened to uphold. All of it hinged on this unthinkable decree. Her pride screamed in protest, her heart ached with the betrayal of her own aspirations. But the cold, undeniable truth settled in her bones. She was trapped. Her dreams, her very identity, were now collateral in a desperate gamble for survival. The next day dawned with a leaden sky, mirroring the weight in Alara's heart. The ultimatum from her grandmother had stripped her of all agency, leaving her feeling like a puppet on strings. With a heavy sigh, she donned a simple, yet elegant, dress, a silent protest against the grimy world she was about to enter. She refused to look like she belonged there. Then came the confusion. Why? Why the elaborate charade? Why the humble garage? The modest apartment? The pretense of a simple life? Had he been mocking her? Playing some cruel game? A strange sense of betrayal began to creep in, cold and unsettling. She had been forced into this marriage, stripped of her dignity, all while he, her supposed husband, harbored such a monumental secret. Evelyn had arranged the meeting for early afternoon, insisting on accompanying Alara. The drive to the outskirts of the city felt like a journey to another dimension. The manicured lawns and stately homes of her neighborhood gradually gave way to bustling commercial strips, then to industrial zones, until finally, they pulled up to a dilapidated building with a faded sign that read, O'Connell's Auto Repair. Her parents, Arthur and Eleanor, rushed towards Liam, their faces alight with a mixture of relief and bewildered gratitude. Liam, my dear boy, we had no idea. Arthur stammered, his voice thick with emotion. Eleanor, tears streaming down her face, embraced him tightly. The air was thick with the scent of oil, gasoline, and something metallic. Discarded tires lay stacked against a wall, and a half-dismantled engine sat on a greasy workbench, its components scattered like forgotten bones. Alara wrinkled her nose, her disdain barely concealed. This was to be her new reality. This grimy, unrefined existence. Liam accepted their thanks with a calm, almost detached composure, his gaze occasionally flicking towards Alara, as if gauging her reaction. He then turned to the stunned board members, his voice regaining its authoritative tone. Gentlemen, ladies, if you'll permit me, I'd like to outline the immediate steps Apex Holdings will take to stabilize Vance Enterprises. A man emerged from beneath a raised car, wiping his hands on a rag. He was tall, surprisingly so, with broad shoulders that strained against his oil-stained work shirt. His hair, a dark, unruly mess, fell across a forehead smudged with grease. Alara braced herself, expecting a gruff, unkempt individual, a caricature of the working class. He spoke with a clarity and precision that left no room for doubt. He detailed capital injections, debt restructuring plans, and strategic initiatives to revitalize the company's various divisions. He moved with the effortless grace of a man accustomed to commanding rooms, his presence filling the space with an undeniable gravitas. He straightened up, and his eyes met hers. Alara watched him, her mind struggling to reconcile the two images of Liam O'Connell, the man who had quietly fixed her flat tire in the pouring rain, and this corporate titan who effortlessly navigated the complexities of global finance. The contrast was jarring, almost surreal. Alara froze. They weren't the dull, vacant eyes she had anticipated. Instead, they were a startling shade of hazel, intelligent and piercing, holding a depth that seemed entirely out of place in this setting. A flicker of something unreadable, amusement understanding, crossed their depths before settling into a neutral, almost detached expression. His jawline was strong, his nose straight, and despite the grime, there was an underlying structure to his face that spoke of quiet strength, not brute force. Later that evening, back in the small apartment above the garage, the silence between them was heavier than usual. The lingering scent of oil seemed to mock her, a cruel reminder of the deception. Alara finally broke the quiet, her voice strained. "You must be Alara," he said, his voice surprisingly smooth, a low baritone that resonated with a quiet confidence. He extended a hand, calloused and stained with grease, but his grip was firm and surprisingly gentle. "Liam O'Connell, it's a pleasure to meet you." "Why?" she asked, her gaze fixed on him. demanding answers. Why the lie? Why pretend to be a mechanic? Ilara hesitated for a fraction of a second, her hand hovering before she reluctantly took his. The contact was brief, but she felt a jolt, an unexpected current that she quickly dismissed as discomfort. Liam turned from the window, his hazel eyes finally meeting hers, no longer guarded, but still unreadable. It wasn't a lie. Ilara. Not entirely. O'Connell's auto repair is a legitimate business, one I inherited from my grandfather. It was my first venture, a place where I learned the value of honest work and attention to detail. And yes, I still work there when I can. It keeps me grounded. Ilara Vance, she replied, her voice stiff, her tone conveying her utter displeasure at the situation. She pulled her hand away quickly. I suppose you know why we're here. He paused, then continued, his voice softer. As for the rest, it was a test. Your grandmother's condition for the inheritance was very specific. She wanted to ensure that her granddaughter married a man who saw beyond superficial wealth, who valued character and integrity. She also needed someone she could trust implicitly to help save Vance Enterprises from the inside, without alerting the very forces that were trying to destroy it. Liam's lips twitched almost imperceptibly, a hint of a smile that never quite formed. My grandmother informed me of the arrangement, he said, his gaze unwavering. He didn't seem intimidated by her frosty demeanor, nor did he offer any apologies for his appearance or his profession. He simply stood there, observing her, a quiet presence that was far more unsettling than any boisterous display could have been. My grandmother knew, Ilara whispered, the betrayal stinging anew. Evelyn, who had been observing the exchange with a keen eye, finally spoke. Liam, Ilara, you two will need to get to know each other. I've made arrangements for the wedding to take place next month. She did, Liam confirmed. She approached me months ago, after Apex Holdings had identified Vance Enterprises as a target for a hostile takeover. Not by us, but by Thorne's network. She saw an opportunity to save her legacy, and to find a partner for you who wasn't interested in the Vance name or fortune, but in the woman behind it. She orchestrated this entire arrangement, believing it was the only way to protect you and the company. Ilara's head snapped towards her grandmother, a fresh wave of horror washing over her. So soon she had hoped for more time, for a miracle, for some way out, but Evelyn's expression was unyielding. Ilara felt a fresh wave of confusion. So her grandmother hadn't betrayed her, but had, in her own formidable way, tried to protect her and Liam. He had gone along with it. The pieces of the puzzle began to click into place, but the picture was still blurry, distorted by her own hurt pride and shattered expectations. She looked at Liam, a man she thought she knew, now revealed as someone entirely different. The quiet mechanic was a corporate titan, a brilliant strategist, and a man who had been playing a very long, very elaborate game. And she, Ilara Vance, had been an unwitting pawn in it all. The revelation was overwhelming, leaving her reeling, questioning everything she thought she knew about him, about herself, and about their marriage. The small apartment, once a symbol of Ilara's confinement, now felt like a crucible where the truth was being forged. The air was thick with the weight of Liam's revelation, and Ilara's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of understanding. Her initial anger and sense of betrayal slowly began to give way to a bewildering mix of confusion and a nascent, reluctant admiration for the sheer scale of the deception. Ilara Vance surveyed the remnants of her family's grandeur with a heavy heart. The once stately Vance Manor, a beacon of old money and impeccable taste, now sagged under the weight of neglect and looming debt. Dust motes danced in the anemic sunlight filtering through the grimy panes of the conservatory, illuminating faded tapestries and antique furniture draped in white sheets like ghosts of a more prosperous past, her own life. Once a whirlwind of charity galas, exclusive designer fittings, and European vacations, had dwindled to a quiet existence, punctuated by the increasingly desperate hushed conversations of her parents. My grandmother, Ilara repeated, the words tasting foreign on her tongue. She knew all along. Liam, however, simply nodded. As you wish, Mrs. Vance. Liam nodded, his gaze steady. Yes, Evelyn Vance is a remarkably shrewd woman. Ilara. Far more so than anyone gives her credit for, especially in her later years. She saw the rot within Vance Enterprises long before your parents did. and she recognized the external threats, particularly Victor Thorne's insidious machinations. His composure infuriated Alara. He seemed completely unfazed by the absurdity of the situation, by the fact that he was about to marry a woman who clearly despised the very idea. This quiet acceptance, this almost serene detachment, only fueled her determination to resist. She would go through with it, yes, for her family, but she would make it clear that this was a marriage of convenience, nothing more, a cold, hard bargain. He walked over to a small, unassuming bookshelf, pulling out a worn leather-bound journal. "This," he said, handing it to Alara, "is a copy of the Vance family pact, an ancient agreement, almost forgotten, that stipulated a specific condition for the ultimate inheritance of the Vance fortune. The heiress must marry someone who embodies true character, not just status or wealth, and who has proven their worth through honest labor and integrity." It was designed to prevent the family from becoming complacent or falling prey to avarice. As they left the garage, Ilara couldn't shake the image of Liam's intelligent eyes, a stark contrast to the grease on his hands. He was not what she expected, and that, paradoxically, made him even more perplexing, even more of a challenge. A flicker of something unreadable in his gaze had left her unsettled, and the thought of being bound to this enigmatic stranger filled her with a potent mix of dread and a strange, nascent curiosity she refused to acknowledge. The wedding day arrived with the inevitability of a rising tide, bringing with it a suffocating blend of dread and resignation for Ilara. It was a stark affair, far removed from the grand, opulent ceremonies that had marked Vance family unions for generations. There were no elaborate floral arrangements, no glittering chandeliers, no endless guest lists filled with the city's elite. Instead, a small, somber gathering took place in the drawing room of Vance Manor, its faded elegance a poignant backdrop to the joyless occasion. Alara opened the journal, her fingers tracing the faded script. It spoke of values, of resilience, of a legacy built on more than just money. She looked up at Liam, a new question forming in her mind. "But why you? How did she even find you?" Alara walked down the makeshift aisle, her white gown feeling less like a symbol of purity and more like a shroud. Her parents, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and sorrow, watched her with a quiet desperation. Every step felt heavy, each beat of her heart a protest against the fate thrust upon her. She was a pawn, a sacrifice on the altar of her family's survival, and the bitterness tasted like ash in her mouth. "My grandfather, Patrick O'Connell, was a trusted mechanic for the Vance family for decades," Liam explained, a faint smile touching his lips. "He was a man of immense integrity and quiet wisdom. Evelyn knew him well. When he passed, I inherited O'Connell's auto repair. It was a small business, but it was profitable, built on trust and hard work. While I was building Apex Holdings, I still kept the garage operational. It was my grounding, my connection to the real world, away from the cutthroat corporate landscape." Liam stood at the end of the aisle, surprisingly composed in a dark suit that, despite its simple cut, seemed to fit him with an understated elegance. His hazel eyes, usually so perceptive, were unreadable, betraying no emotion as Alara approached. He offered no smile, no gesture of comfort, simply a silent acceptance of the bizarre circumstances binding them. The vows were exchanged in hushed tones, the words feeling hollow and meaningless to Alara, a mere formality sealing her gilded cage. He continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Evelyn approached me months ago, not long after Apex Holdings had identified Vance Enterprises as a potential target for a hostile takeover. Not by us, as I said, but by a shadow network linked to Thorne. She was desperate. She knew her family was too entrenched in their old ways, too trusting, to see the danger. She needed an outsider, someone with the resources and the strategic mind to uncover Thorne's plot and dismantle it from within." There was no reception, no celebratory feast. Immediately after the brief ceremony, Evelyn Vance, ever efficient, directed them to their new home. It was a modest apartment located directly above O'Connell's auto repair, a stark, almost cruel contrast to the sprawling Vance estate Ilara had known her entire life. "So, the car mechanic was a cover?" Ilara asked, a hint of bitterness still in her voice. The apartment was clean, surprisingly so, but small and sparsely furnished. The air, even indoors, carried a faint, lingering scent of oil and gasoline, a constant reminder of her new reality. A small living area, a compact kitchen, and a single bedroom. It was a world away from the spacious rooms and luxurious amenities she was accustomed to. It was a test. Primarily for you, Liam corrected gently. Evelyn wanted to see if you could look beyond the superficial, if you could find value in character over status. She believed that if you could accept a life that was so different from what you knew, if you could endure the perceived hardship of marrying a simple mechanic, it would prove your resilience and inner strength. And it would also give me the perfect cover to infiltrate Vance Enterprises' inner circle without raising Thorne's suspicions. Ilara stood in the middle of the living room, her wedding dress feeling absurdly out of place. She felt trapped, suffocated by the low ceilings and the unfamiliar quiet. Her gaze fell upon Liam, who had entered behind her, his movements as quiet and unassuming as ever. He simply stood there, observing her, his hands in his pockets, a silent sentinel in her new prison. He walked over to a small whiteboard in the corner, which Ilara now realized was covered in intricate diagrams and flowcharts, not car parts. Thorne had been systematically weakening Vance Enterprises for years, Liam explained, pointing to various points on the board. He had informants on the board, manipulated stock prices, diverted funds through shell companies, and deliberately undermined key projects. He wanted to buy the company for pennies on the dollar, then strip its assets. My role was to expose him, gather irrefutable evidence, and then, at the opportune moment, intervene. This is it, Ilara finally managed, her voice barely a whisper, laced with disbelief and a fresh wave of resentment. She gestured vaguely around the small space. This is where I'm supposed to live after everything. Ilara stared at the whiteboard, the complex web of deceit laid bare before her. The scale of Thorne's villainy and the brilliance of Liam's counter-strategy began to sink in. Her grandmother hadn't been cruel. She had been strategic, playing a long game to protect her family. And Liam, the man she had resented, had been a key player in that intricate, high-stakes chess match. Liam's expression remained impassive. It's clean, it's functional, it's home. His tone was devoid of malice, but also of sympathy, a simple statement of fact. So, the late-night calls, the financial newspapers, that was all part of it, Ilara asked, a new understanding dawning on her. Ilara felt a surge of anger. Home. This is a cage. My grandmother forced me into this. Forced me to abandon everything I know for this. Her voice rose, trembling with frustrated tears. Don't you understand what you've done? What we've done? Every bit of it, Liam confirmed. I had to keep tabs on Thorne's movements, monitor the market, and coordinate with my team at Apex Holdings. The garage provided the perfect alibi. No one would suspect a humble mechanic of orchestrating a multi-million-dollar corporate rescue. Liam's eyes finally held a flicker of something, a fleeting shadow of what might have been pity, or perhaps just weariness. I understand the terms of the agreement, Ilara, he said, his voice soft but firm. And I understand the stakes. Your family's future and mine now depend on this. Ilara felt a strange mix of emotions. The sting of deception was still there, but it was now tempered by a growing respect for Liam's intellect and his unwavering commitment to her grandmother's plan. He had endured her disdain, her resentment, her constant complaints, all while carrying the weight of a monumental secret and working tirelessly to save her family. The quiet mechanic was not just a CEO, he was a silent guardian, a man of profound integrity, who had chosen to play a humble role for a greater purpose. The past, once a source of bitter confusion, was slowly unraveling, revealing a complex tapestry woven with foresight, sacrifice, and an unexpected, profound act of protection. The initial shock of Liam's revelation slowly began to subside, replaced by a complex tapestry of emotions within Ilara. The sting of deception lingered, a faint echo of her wounded pride, but it was increasingly overshadowed by a growing understanding and, to her surprise, a burgeoning respect. Her grandmother's foresight, once perceived as cruel manipulation, now appeared as an act of profound, if unconventional, love. Evelyn Vance had not merely orchestrated a marriage, she had engineered a rescue. His calm, almost detached demeanor only fueled her fury. He seemed utterly unaffected by the emotional turmoil raging within her. He was a wall, an impenetrable barrier, and she felt a desperate urge to shatter his composure. to make him feel even a fraction of the despair that consumed her. In the days and weeks that followed, Ilara and Liam found themselves working side by side, not just as husband and wife, but as partners in the monumental task of rebuilding Vance Enterprises. The small apartment above the garage became their strategic command center. The whiteboard, once a source of confusion, was now a dynamic canvas for their plans, covered in flowcharts, financial projections, and new corporate structures. The first few days were a blur of resentment and struggle. Ilara found herself navigating the mundane tasks of a mechanic's wife, a role she despised with every fiber of her being. The simple act of making coffee felt alien. The small kitchen, a foreign land. She longed for the familiar comforts of Vance Manor, the quiet hum of servants, the freedom to pursue her own interests. Ilara, with her intimate knowledge of Vance Enterprises' history, its key personnel, and its intricate internal workings, proved to be an invaluable asset. She provided crucial insights into the company's culture, identified long-standing inefficiencies, and helped navigate the delicate political landscape within the board. Her sharp mind, once focused on social engagements and superficial concerns, now found its true calling in the high-stakes world of corporate revitalization. Liam, meanwhile, maintained his quiet, almost detached presence. He spent his days in the garage below, the sounds of wrenches clanging and engines roaring a constant backdrop to Ilara's misery. In the evenings, he would return, clean up, and eat dinner in silence, often with a book or a tablet in hand. He rarely initiated conversation, but his eyes were always observing her, a silent, almost unnerving scrutiny that made Ilara feel perpetually exposed. She was trapped, married to a stranger, and the future stretched before her, an endless expanse of unfamiliarity and resentment. Ilara clung to the vestiges of her old life with a desperate tenacity. Each morning, she would meticulously apply her makeup, choose an outfit that screamed Vance heiress, and attempt to project an air of normalcy, as if her world hadn't been irrevocably altered. She still met her socialite friends for lunch at exclusive downtown cafes, her conversations carefully curated to avoid any mention of her new, humble abode above a garage. She spoke of vague family matters and new ventures, weaving a fragile tapestry of lies to maintain appearances. Liam, with the vast resources of Apex Holdings at his disposal, acted as the strategic mastermind. He brought in top-tier financial analysts, legal experts, and management consultants. He meticulously untangled the complex web of Thorne's illicit activities, uncovering more shell companies, fraudulent contracts, and a hidden network of complicit individuals who had aided Thorne in his scheme to bleed Vance Enterprises dry. Each discovery was a fresh wound, but also a step closer to full recovery. But the reality of her marriage was a relentless undertow, constantly pulling her back into its mundane, suffocating grip. The scent of oil and gasoline seemed to permeate her designer clothes, a constant, unwelcome reminder. The clanging of wrenches from below, the roar of engines being tested, punctuated her days, a stark contrast to the quiet elegance of her past. She found herself performing domestic tasks she had never even conceived of before. Washing dishes in a small sink, attempting to cook in a compact kitchen, navigating the unfamiliar rhythms of a life devoid of personal assistants and household staff. Every chore felt like a personal affront, a symbol of her fallen status. As they spent countless hours together, poring over documents, strategizing late into the night, Ilara began to see Liam in a new light. The quiet detachment she had once resented now appeared as calm focus. His unwavering composure in the face of daunting challenges was not indifference, but strength. She witnessed his integrity firsthand as he ensured that every decision was made not just for profit, but for the long-term health of the company and the well-being of its employees. He was fair, decisive, and remarkably patient, even when she, still grappling with the emotional fallout, would lash out in frustration. Liam, meanwhile, continued to be an enigma. He was a man of few words, his presence in the small apartment often marked by a profound silence that Ilara found both unnerving and infuriating. He would leave early for the garage, returning late, his hands always bearing the telltale signs of his trade. He ate his meals with a quiet efficiency, his eyes often scanning a financial newspaper or a tablet, a habit Ilara found perplexing. Why would a car mechanic be so engrossed in the stock market or global economic trends? He listened to her ideas with genuine interest, often expanding on them with his own brilliant insights. He valued her input, treating her not as a reluctant bride, but as an intelligent, capable partner. He never once gloated about his true identity or her initial disdain. Instead, he offered quiet support, a steady presence amidst the chaos. Her resentment towards him simmered, a constant low flame. She saw him as the physical embodiment of her grandmother's betrayal, the symbol of her lost future. Yet, beneath the layers of her anger, a strange observation began to surface. Liam's habits were, to say the least, peculiar for a simple mechanic. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of uncovering Thorne's more egregious financial manipulations, Ilara leaned back, exhausted. "It's incredible," she murmured, "how deep this goes. He almost destroyed everything." She noticed the late-night phone calls. He would often slip out onto the small balcony, his voice hushed, speaking in a language Ilara couldn't quite decipher. But the tone was always serious, authoritative. Sometimes, she would catch snippets of English, terms like market fluctuations, acquisition targets, strategic partnerships. These were not the conversations of a man whose primary concern was a faulty carburetor. Liam nodded, his eyes fixed on a complex spreadsheet. He was thorough, but he underestimated the resilience of the Vance legacy and the determination of those who truly care about it. He looked at her then, a soft, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "And he certainly underestimated you, Ilara." Then there was his uncanny knowledge. One evening, she overheard him casually discussing a complex geopolitical event on the news, offering an analysis that was surprisingly insightful and nuanced, far beyond what she'd expect from someone who spent his days under car hoods. Another time, she mentioned, almost offhandedly, a minor stock market dip that had caused a ripple of concern among her parents, and Liam, without looking up from his book, calmly explained the underlying economic indicators that had led to it, predicting its short-term recovery with chilling accuracy. His words, simple yet sincere, warmed her in a way no compliment about her appearance or social standing ever had. She realized, with a jolt, that her initial resentment had slowly, imperceptibly, transformed. It had morphed into respect for his intellect, admiration for his character, and a burgeoning affection for the man beneath the layers of secrecy. She found herself drawn to his quiet strength, his unwavering moral compass, and the unexpected kindness that occasionally surfaced. His personal effects were equally baffling. While his apartment was modest, Ilara once glimpsed a sleek, high-end laptop, far too powerful for simple garage accounting, and a collection of books on economics, corporate law, and international finance. These were not the typical interests of a mechanic. The apartment, once a symbol of her gilded cage, now felt like a shared space, a place where their two vastly different worlds had begun to intertwine. The sounds from the garage below, once an irritant, now seemed like a comforting hum, a reminder of the honest work that grounded Liam, even as he navigated the dizzying heights of global finance. Ilara was no longer merely enduring her marriage. She was, to her astonishment, beginning to cherish it. The foundation of their relationship, built on a forced pact and a profound deception, was slowly, painstakingly, being rebuilt on trust, mutual respect, and a quiet, undeniable connection. The bond between Ilara and Liam, forged in the crucible of corporate warfare and personal revelation, grew stronger with each passing day. Their shared purpose in revitalizing Vance Enterprises became the foundation of a trust that transcended their unconventional beginning. With Liam's unparalleled resources from Apex Holdings and Ilara's deep-seated understanding of her family's company, they formed an unstoppable team, meticulously piecing together the final, damning evidence against Victor Thorne. An air of quiet authority seemed to cling to him. Even when he was simply reading or eating, he moved with a deliberate grace, his gaze missing nothing. He was observant, almost unnervingly so, often catching her eye when she thought she was unobserved. A silent question in his hazel depths. He never commented on her attempts to maintain her old facade, never questioned her late returns from lunch with friends. He simply watched, a silent, knowing presence. The investigation led them down a labyrinthine path of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and manipulated financial records. They uncovered a sophisticated network of complicit individuals, disgruntled former employees, corrupt board members, and even seemingly legitimate business partners, all of whom Thorne had either bribed, blackmailed, or deceived into aiding his scheme. Each discovery was a chilling testament to Thorne's ruthlessness and the depth of his ambition. Ilara dismissed these observations as anomalies, quirks of a man she didn't understand. She told herself it was just her imagination, or perhaps a desperate attempt to find something, anything, to justify the absurdity of her situation. Yet, the seeds of suspicion were sown. The quiet mechanic was not quite what he seemed, and the growing disparity between his humble profession and his increasingly sophisticated habits left Ilara with a gnawing sense of unease, a feeling that there was a secret lurking beneath the surface of Liam O'Connell. The fragile facade Ilara had so meticulously constructed around her new life began to crack under the relentless pressure of reality. The whispers started subtly, then grew louder, echoing through the empty halls of Vance Manor and seeping into her carefully curated social circles. Vance Enterprises is in trouble. Hostile takeover. Bankruptcy is imminent. Each hushed conversation, each sympathetic glance, felt like a fresh stab. Her parents, once proud and resilient, now moved like shadows, their faces etched with a profound weariness that went beyond mere financial stress. Ilara often overheard their desperate phone calls, fragments of conversations that painted a grim picture. The creditors are circling. Thorne's offer is predatory. We're running out of time. The name Thorne became a chilling refrain, a harbinger of doom. Victor Thorne, a notorious corporate raider known for his ruthless tactics and insatiable appetite for failing companies, was closing in. One evening, Ilara found her mother, Eleanor, weeping silently in the drawing room, clutching a framed photograph of her own parents. "It's all going to be gone, Ilara," she sobbed, her voice raw with despair. "Everything, the legacy, the history, your grandmother's life's work. It's slipping through our fingers." Liam, who was reviewing a complex legal brief, immediately leaned over. "Let me see." His fingers flew across the keyboard, decrypting the files with an ease that still astonished Ilara. The messages revealed a chilling truth. Thorne had not merely exploited Vance Enterprises' weaknesses, he had actively created them. He had planted false intelligence, sabotaged key deals, and even orchestrated minor crises to drive down the company's stock value, making it ripe for his predatory takeover. The true gravity of their situation, once an abstract concept, now hit Ilara with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just about her lost dreams or her forced marriage. It was about the complete annihilation of everything her family had ever been. The weight of it pressed down on her, suffocating her with a sense of helplessness. He was playing a long game, Liam stated, his voice tight with controlled anger. He didn't just want to acquire the company, he wanted to dismantle it, asset by asset, leaving nothing but a husk. The hostile takeover was merely the final, public act. During these increasingly frequent moments of despair, Ilara found herself acutely aware of Liam's presence. He never intruded, never offered unsolicited advice, yet his quiet observations were unnerving. He would sit in the small living room, seemingly engrossed in his financial newspapers or his high-end tablet. But Ilara often caught his hazel eyes flicking towards her, a fleeting intensity in their depths before he would calmly return to his reading. It was as if he understood the unspoken anxieties that plagued her, the silent battles she fought within herself. The most damning piece of evidence emerged from a hidden ledger, meticulously kept by one of Thorne's most trusted, albeit disgruntled, associates. It detailed every illicit transaction, every bribe paid, every act of sabotage, complete with dates, amounts, and names. It was the smoking gun they needed, irrefutable proof of Thorne's criminal enterprise. One day, as Ilara was attempting to decipher a complex financial report her father had inadvertently left behind, she muttered, "It's all so confusing. How can a company just disappear?" Armed with this overwhelming evidence, Liam scheduled a meeting with the highest levels of law enforcement and financial regulatory bodies. Ilara insisted on being present, her resolve hardened by the sheer audacity of Thorne's betrayal against her family. Liam, from his usual spot, without looking up, responded, "Companies don't just disappear, Ilara. They're either mismanaged or they're targeted. Sometimes, both." His voice was calm, almost academic. The confrontation, though not direct, was intense. Thorne, initially confident and dismissive, found his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. He attempted to discredit the evidence, to paint Liam as a vengeful competitor, but the sheer volume and irrefutability of the proof left him no room to maneuver. Liam presented the case with the precision of a seasoned prosecutor, laying bare every detail of Thorne's elaborate scheme. Alara scoffed. And what would a mechanic know about corporate finance? As the authorities began to move, Thorne, realizing his imminent downfall, made a desperate attempt to flee. News channels reported his private jet being prepped for an unscheduled departure, his security detail scrambling. He believed his wealth and influence would allow him to escape justice, as they always had. He finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. More than you might think. The statement was delivered without arrogance, simply as a fact. Yet it held a quiet authority that grated on her nerves, but Liam had anticipated this. With Apex Holdings' global reach and intelligence network, Thorne's escape routes were systematically cut off. Every airport, every private port, every potential safe house was monitored. Alara, watching the news unfold from the apartment, felt a surge of grim satisfaction. The predator was now the prey. The more she observed him, the more her suspicions grew. His late-night calls continued, the hushed tones and snippets of corporate jargon becoming more frequent. She once saw him sketching complex flowcharts on a notepad, diagrams that looked suspiciously like corporate structures, not engine schematics. He would occasionally receive encrypted emails on his laptop, which he would quickly close if she entered the room. The final act of the unmasking came swiftly. Thorne, cornered and desperate, was apprehended at a remote airstrip, just moments before he could board a plane to a country with no extradition treaty. The news flashed across every major network. Corporate raider Victor Thorne arrested on charges of fraud and corporate espionage. Her initial dismissals of his peculiar habits now felt inadequate. The disparity between his humble profession and his increasingly sophisticated interests was too vast to ignore. It wasn't just a quirk. It was a deliberate concealment, a secret. Alara looked at Liam, a silent understanding passing between them. They had done it. They had not only saved Vance Enterprises, but had also ensured that justice, long delayed, was finally served. The battle was won, and the true villain, stripped of his power and influence, was finally brought to account. The news of Victor Thorne's arrest sent shockwaves through the corporate world, a seismic event that reverberated far beyond the confines of Vance Enterprises. The detailed reports, fueled by the irrefutable evidence meticulously compiled by Liam and Alara, painted a damning picture of a man whose ambition had long overshadowed his ethics. The headlines screamed of fraud, corporate espionage, and a web of deceit that had nearly brought a venerable institution to its knees. A gnawing unease settled in Alara's stomach. Was Liam truly just a simple mechanic who happened to have an unusual hobby? Or was there something far more significant at play? Was he connected to the financial turmoil of Vance Enterprises in some way? The thought was absurd, yet the evidence, however circumstantial, continued to mount. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. Thorne, stripped of his power, his influence, and his carefully constructed facade, found himself facing the full, unyielding force of the law. His attempts to deflect blame, to paint himself as a victim of a corporate vendetta, crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Witnesses, emboldened by his downfall, came forward with their own testimonies, revealing years of intimidation, coercion, and illicit dealings. The fear for her family's future, coupled with the growing suspicion about her enigmatic husband, created a volatile cocktail of emotions within Alara. She felt isolated, trapped in a marriage to a man she barely knew, a man who seemed to hold a secret that might be intrinsically linked to her family's impending doom. Liam's quiet, intense gaze, which seemed to penetrate her very thoughts, only fueled her growing paranoia. She was desperate for answers, for clarity, but the more she looked, the more layers of mystery she uncovered. The air in the small apartment above O'Connell's auto repair was thick with unspoken tension. Alara continued to grapple with the dual anxieties of her family's impending ruin and the unsettling mystery of her husband. The sounds from the garage below, once a mere annoyance, now seemed to mock her, a constant reminder of her forced reality. Alara and Liam attended key hearings, not out of vengeance, but out of a quiet sense of duty. They watched as Thorne, once so arrogant and self-assured, withered under the relentless scrutiny of the court. The man who had reveled in the despair of others now found himself trapped in a cage of his own making, his future bleak and his reputation irrevocably shattered. The sight of him, broken and exposed, brought a profound sense of closure to Alara. It wasn't about gloating, it was about seeing justice served. One particularly dreary afternoon, a torrential downpour turned the city streets into treacherous rivers. Alara, attempting to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the apartment, decided to visit her parents at Vance Manor. She called for a taxi, but the lines were jammed and no cars were available. Frustration bubbled within her. She couldn't even manage a simple trip without encountering an obstacle. Meanwhile, under Liam's strategic guidance and Alara's renewed dedication, Vance Enterprises began its remarkable resurgence. The capital injection from Apex Holdings stabilized its finances, and Liam's expert team initiated a comprehensive restructuring. Obsolete divisions were streamlined, innovative new projects were launched, and a culture of transparency and accountability was meticulously rebuilt. Alara, now a vital part of the leadership team, spearheaded initiatives to reconnect with long-lost clients and restore trust within the industry. Just as she was about to give up, Liam emerged from the garage, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. He saw her standing by the window, her face a mask of exasperation. "Trouble?" he asked, his voice calm amidst the drumming rain against the roof. The company, once teetering on the brink of collapse, not only recovered but began to thrive, surpassing its former glory. Its stock prices soared, new partnerships were forged, and its workforce, once demoralized, now buzzed with renewed energy and loyalty. The Vance name, once whispered with sympathy, was now spoken with admiration, a testament to resilience and astute leadership. Alara sighed, her pride warring with her desperation. "I need to get to Vance Manor, my parents. They're not doing well, but I can't get a taxi." Evelyn Vance, the formidable matriarch, observed it all from a quiet distance. She had moved back into a revitalized Vance Manor, overseeing the restoration with a keen eye. She rarely spoke of the arrangement or Liam's true identity, but her eyes, whenever they rested on Alara and Liam, held a deep, quiet satisfaction. Her plan, audacious and unconventional as it was, had succeeded beyond her wildest expectations. Not only had she saved her family's legacy, but she had also, in her own unique way, ensured her granddaughter found a partner worthy of her. Liam nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. "The roads are bad. Most drivers are probably staying off them." He paused, then added, "I can take you." One afternoon, Alara found Evelyn sitting in the sun-drenched conservatory, a rare, soft smile gracing her lips. "You did well, child," Evelyn said, her voice softer than Alara had ever heard it. "Both of you. Your grandfather would be proud." Alara stared at him, surprised. "You in what?" She imagined him pulling out a beat-up pickup truck, covered in rust and smelling of oil. The thought was mortifying. Alara smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. "It was all thanks to you, grandmother, and Liam." Without a word, Liam walked over to a corner of the garage, where a sleek, dark sedan, surprisingly clean and well-maintained, was parked. It was a modest car, certainly not a luxury vehicle, but it was far from the dilapidated workhorses she expected. He opened the passenger door for her. Evelyn merely nodded, her gaze drifting towards the vibrant gardens outside. Sometimes, the most unconventional paths lead to the greatest rewards. True strength, Alara, lies not in what you possess, but in who you are, and who you choose to stand beside. Reluctantly, Alara got in. The interior was clean, devoid of the usual garage smells. As Liam navigated the flooded streets with quiet expertise, Alara found herself observing him. He drove with a calm efficiency, his hands steady on the wheel, his eyes scanning the road with an almost preternatural awareness. He avoided potholes and navigated tricky turns with ease, never once seeming flustered by the chaotic weather. The shadow of Victor Thorne began to fade, replaced by the bright promise of a new era for Vance Enterprises. Justice had been served, the villain vanquished, and the path was now clear for a future built on integrity, hard work, and the unexpected bond that had blossomed between an heiress and her mechanic, CEO. The family's reputation was fully restored, and a new, stronger legacy was being forged. with Victor Thorne's shadow finally lifted and Vance Enterprises flourishing. A sense of peace, long absent, settled over Alara. The relentless pressure had eased, allowing her to truly breathe for the first time in months. In this newfound calm, the quiet bond that had formed between her and Liam began to deepen, evolving from a partnership born of necessity into something far more profound. Midway through the drive, a sudden, sharp bang echoed from beneath the car. The vehicle lurched, and Liam calmly pulled over to the side of the road. "Flat tire," he stated, his voice even. Their days were still busy, filled with meetings and strategic planning for Vance Enterprises, but the urgency had been replaced by a shared vision. They continued to work seamlessly together, their strengths complementing each other perfectly. Alara found herself increasingly relying on Liam's keen intellect and steady judgment, while Liam, in turn, valued Ilara's intuitive understanding of people and her growing business acumen. Ilara's heart sank. This was it. Stranded. Her frustration flared. "Great! Just great! Now what?" One evening, after a particularly successful day of negotiations that secured a major new contract for Vance Enterprises, they found themselves back in the apartment above the garage. The air was no longer thick with tension, but with a comfortable, easy silence. Alara looked at Liam, truly looked at him, seeing past the initial deception, past the image of the humble mechanic, and past the formidable CEO. She saw the man who had quietly supported her, who had endured her resentment, and who had, against all odds, saved her family. Liam, however, was already out of the car, retrieving a jack and a spare tire from the trunk. The rain was relentless, plastering his hair to his forehead and soaking his clothes, but he worked with a practiced speed and precision that left Alara momentarily speechless. He didn't complain, didn't curse, didn't even seem to notice the discomfort. His movements were fluid, economical, the actions of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. "Liam," she began, her voice soft, I owe you an apology. For how I treated you, for my assumptions." Within minutes, the flat tire was off, and the spare was being mounted. His hands, though still stained with grease, moved with an almost surgical dexterity. Alara watched from the relative dryness of the car, a strange mix of awe and discomfort stirring within her. This was not the bumbling, unrefined mechanic she had envisioned. This was a man of quiet competence, capable and self-reliant. He turned from the window, his hazel eyes meeting hers. There was no judgment in them, only understanding. "You had every right to feel the way you did. Alara, the situation was unfair to you, and I understand why you reacted as you did. I knew what I was getting into." One evening, while sifting through a mountain of digital files, Alara stumbled upon a series of encrypted communications. "These look like internal memos," she said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "But they're from a server that's not part of Vance Enterprises." "But you still went through with it," she murmured, a warmth spreading through her chest. "You endured my disdain, my anger, all for a family that wasn't even yours, for a legacy you didn't owe anything to." "All right," he said, starting the engine. "We're good to go." A faint smile touched his lips. "It became more than just a pact. Alara, your grandmother's vision, the integrity of Vance Enterprises, it was worth fighting for. And," he paused, his gaze intensifying, "I also saw something in you, a strength, a spirit that I admired, even when you were at your most resistant." Alara found herself unable to maintain her usual frosty demeanor. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. You handled that very quickly." Alara felt a blush creep up her neck. She had always been admired for her beauty, her social standing, but never for her strength or spirit. His words resonated deeply within her. Liam merely gave a slight nod, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "It's what I do." "I never thought," she began, then hesitated, searching for the right words. "I never thought I'd find happiness in a marriage that started like ours." They continued the rest of the journey in silence, but the dynamic had subtly shifted. Alara still felt resentment, still harbored suspicions, but a small, undeniable crack had appeared in her carefully constructed wall of disdain. Liam had shown a side of himself she hadn't anticipated, not just competence, but a quiet willingness to help, a calm resourcefulness in a crisis. It was a small act, but it forced her to acknowledge a hidden depth to him, a capability that went beyond simply fixing cars. The seeds of reluctant respect had been planted, and for the first time since her forced marriage, Ilara felt a faint, almost imperceptible glimmer of something other than despair. The day of the critical board meeting arrived, heavy with the weight of impending doom. Ilara dressed with a sense of grim finality, choosing a dark, tailored suit that felt more like armor than attire. Her parents, Arthur and Eleanor Vance, looked utterly defeated, their usual aristocratic composure replaced by a fragile desperation. This was their last stand, the final act in the tragedy of Vance Enterprises. Liam stepped closer, closing the small distance between them. Happiness isn't found in grand gestures or perfect beginnings. Ilara. It's built, brick by brick, through shared experiences, through understanding, and through choosing to see beyond the surface. He reached out, gently taking her hand. His touch, once a source of discomfort, now sent a comforting warmth through her veins. I saw the real you, Ilara, even when you were trying to hide it, and I found myself wanting to protect that. The boardroom, located on the top floor of the Vance Tower, usually buzzed with the quiet confidence of power. Today, it was a mausoleum of whispered anxieties and forced smiles. The air was thick with tension, a palpable dread that clung to every polished surface. Board members, once loyal allies, now sat with averted gazes, their faces betraying a mix of sorrow and self-preservation. In that moment, all the lingering hurt, all the remnants of her pride, dissolved. She saw the genuine affection in his eyes, the unwavering support that had been there all along. Hidden beneath his quiet demeanor, she realized that the man she had initially despised was the one who truly understood her, who saw her not as an heiress, but as a woman of substance. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Victor Thorne, a man whose reputation preceded him like a dark storm cloud. He was a predator in human form, his sharp features and cold, calculating eyes reflecting a singular ambition to dismantle and devour. He exuded an aura of smug triumph, clearly relishing the impending collapse of a once great dynasty. His legal team, a phalanx of equally sharp-suited individuals, flanked him, their briefcases bulging with documents designed to seal Vance Enterprises' fate. And Ilara confessed, her voice barely a whisper, I've come to see you, Liam. Not the mechanic, not the CEO, but the man. The kind, brilliant, incredibly patient man who saved everything. And She took a breath, her heart full. I think I've fallen in love with him. Arthur Vance, his voice trembling slightly, began the meeting, attempting to present a last-ditch effort to salvage the company. But his words lacked conviction, hollow against the backdrop of their undeniable financial ruin. Eleanor sat beside him, her hand clasped tightly in his, her eyes wide with fear. A genuine smile, full and radiant, finally broke across Liam's face, transforming his features. He pulled her gently into his arms, and Ilara leaned into his embrace, feeling a sense of belonging she had never known. Their kiss was tender, a silent promise of a future built on mutual respect, understanding, and a love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of circumstances. Their marriage, born of an ancient pact and a desperate gamble, had found its true purpose, forged in the fires of adversity and cemented by a profound, undeniable connection. With the dust settled and their love openly acknowledged, Ilara and Liam embarked on a new chapter, both personally and professionally. Vance Enterprises, once a symbol of their family's decline, was now a shining testament to their combined efforts and Evelyn's audacious foresight. Under Liam's strategic leadership as CEO and Ilara's passionate involvement as a key executive, the company didn't just recover, it soared to unprecedented heights. Ilara watched, her heart pounding against her ribs. She felt a surge of protectiveness for her parents, a fierce anger at Thorne, and a profound sense of helplessness. This was her family's legacy, her grandmother's life's work, being systematically dismantled before her very eyes. Liam, with his deep understanding of global markets and innovative technologies, diversified Vance Enterprises' portfolio, venturing into sustainable energy and advanced manufacturing. Ilara, leveraging her innate understanding of brand and her newly honed business acumen, revitalized the company's public image, ensuring its legacy was not just preserved but redefined for a new era. Their synergy was undeniable, a powerful force that propelled the company forward. Thorne, with a condescending smirk, allowed Arthur to finish before leaning forward, his voice a smooth, venomous purr. "Mr. Vance, your efforts are commendable, but ultimately futile. The numbers speak for themselves. Vance Enterprises is a sinking ship. My offer stands a hostile takeover, a complete acquisition of all assets, and a severance package for your remaining employees. It's the only way to prevent total bankruptcy and a public, humiliating liquidation." Their marriage, born of an ancient pact and a profound deception, had blossomed into a true partnership. The small apartment above O'Connell's auto repair, once a place of resentment for Alara, became a cherished sanctuary. It was where they shared quiet mornings, discussed complex business strategies over late-night tea, and simply existed in comfortable, loving companionship. Liam still visited the garage, finding solace in the honest work, and Ilara often joined him, no longer with disdain, but with a genuine interest in the mechanics of things, a reflection of her broader acceptance of his multifaceted life. He laid out documents, his words a barrage of legal jargon and financial figures that painted a picture of utter devastation. He highlighted every misstep, every failed venture, every debt, twisting the knife with precision. He spoke of the inevitable, the merciful end, his tone dripping with false sympathy. Their love story became a quiet legend within their circles. It was a tale of an unlikely union, of an heiress who found her true match not in the glittering ballrooms of high society, but in the unassuming wisdom and strength of a man who saw beyond superficiality. Ilara learned that true value lay not in inherited wealth or social status, but in integrity, resilience, and the profound connection forged through shared adversity. Liam, in turn, found in Ilara a partner who was not only intelligent and capable, but also deeply empathetic and fiercely loyal. A woman who saw him for who he truly was, beyond his titles and fortunes. Ilara's blood ran cold. Thorne's proposal was not just an acquisition, it was an execution. He was offering a pittance, stripping the company bare, and leaving the Vance family with nothing but the bitter taste of defeat. She saw the despair deepen in her parents' eyes, the last flicker of hope dying out. Years passed, filled with growth, challenges, and unwavering support for one another. Vance Manor, fully restored to its former glory, became a place of joyous family gatherings once more. Evelyn Vance, her mission accomplished, passed away peacefully, leaving behind a legacy not just of wealth, but of wisdom and a family united by an unconventional, yet deeply loving, bond. "This is outrageous. Thorne," Arthur finally managed, his voice cracking. "You're preying on our misfortune." Ilara and Liam often reflected on their journey, marveling at the twists of fate that had brought them together. Their marriage stood as a powerful symbol, a testament to the unexpected paths to happiness, the transformative power of love, and the enduring strength found in embracing authenticity. They built a future together, not just for themselves, but for the generations to come, ensuring that the Vance legacy, now intertwined with the O'Connell spirit of integrity and hard work, would continue to thrive, a beacon of resilience and true partnership. Thorne merely shrugged, a picture of detached indifference. "Business, Mr. Vance. Nothing personal. Sign the papers, and this can all be over cleanly. Resist, and I assure you, the public humiliation will be far greater." Their story, once a private drama, became a quiet inspiration, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary and seemingly impossible of places. The board members shifted uncomfortably, their silence a tacit agreement with Thorne's assessment. They were pragmatic individuals, and the numbers, as Thorne had so cruelly pointed out, were undeniable. There was no escape. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more thrilling tales of unexpected love and justice, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay with us for the next one. And while you're here, check out our other videos. There's always more to explore. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Ilara felt a wave of nausea. This was it. The end. Her grandmother's desperate gamble, her own forced marriage, all for nothing. The grand Vance legacy, reduced to a footnote in a corporate raiders portfolio. She closed her eyes, bracing herself for the final, devastating blow. The pen was poised over the document, Thorne's smirk widening, victory within his grasp. The silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by the soft click of the pen, the soft click of Victor Thorne's pen, poised to sign the death warrant of Vance Enterprises, echoed ominously in the suffocating silence of the boardroom. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of despair. Her parents sat frozen, their faces pale with resignation. The board members shifted uncomfortably, their gazes fixed on the document, awaiting the inevitable. This was it. The end. Just as Thorne's hand began its descent, the heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open with a resounding thud. Every head snapped towards the entrance. Standing in the doorway was a figure that sent a ripple of confusion, then shock, through the room. It was Liam O'Connell. But this was not the grease-stained mechanic Ilara knew. This was a man transformed. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored, charcoal gray suit that hugged his broad shoulders, exuding an aura of quiet power and undeniable confidence. His dark, unruly hair was neatly styled, and his hazel eyes, usually so guarded, now gleamed with an intelligent, almost predatory glint. He looked less like a mechanic and more like a titan of industry. A collective gasp swept through the room. Thorne, momentarily startled, frowned. "Who is this?" he demanded, his voice sharp with annoyance. Liam ignored him, his gaze sweeping across the stunned faces in the room, finally settling on Ilara, a flicker of something unreadable passing between them. He walked with a deliberate, unhurried stride toward the head of the table, his presence commanding attention with every step. "My apologies for the interruption," Liam said, his voice no longer the quiet baritone Ilara was used to, but a clear, resonant tone that filled the room with authority. "However, I believe this meeting is about to take an unexpected turn." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and produced a sleek, silver tablet, placing it firmly on the table before Thorne. "Victor Thorne," Liam stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "Your offer for Vance Enterprises is not only predatory, but it is also based on a foundation of deliberate misinformation and calculated sabotage." Thorne's smug expression vanished, replaced by a flicker of alarm. "What nonsense is this? Who are you?" When he finished, he wiped his hands on a rag, his face streaked with rain and grime, but his eyes held a quiet satisfaction. He got back into the car, a faint scent of damp earth and oil accompanying him. Liam finally met Thorne's gaze, his eyes narrowing. "My name is Liam O'Connell, and I am the CEO of Apex Holdings." The Vance name, synonymous with power and prestige for generations, was now whispered in hushed tones, often followed by sympathetic sighs or, worse, thinly veiled schadenfreude. Ilara, with her striking emerald eyes and a cascade of dark, wavy hair, still carried the aristocratic bearing of her lineage, but it felt like a costume she was rapidly outgrowing. Her dreams of revitalizing Vance Enterprises, the family's crumbling conglomerate, and restoring their former glory, felt more like a cruel joke with each passing day. The name hit the room like a thunderclap. Apex Holdings, the multinational conglomerate, a powerhouse in global finance and technology, renowned for its aggressive yet ethical acquisitions and its staggering net worth. The whispers that followed were a mix of disbelief and awe. Then came the summons from her grandmother, Evelyn Vance. Evelyn, the formidable matriarch, was a woman carved from granite and steel, her silver hair always impeccably coiffed, her gaze sharp enough to cut through pretense. Even in her advanced years, she commanded a presence that could silence a room. And Ilara felt a familiar tremor of apprehension as she stepped into the dimly lit study. The scent of old leather and forgotten ambition hanging heavy in the air. Arthur Vance gasped, his eyes wide with shock. Eleanor clutched her husband's arm, her mouth agape. Ilara felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. Liam, the mechanic, the CEO of Apex Holdings. It was an impossible, dizzying revelation. Evelyn sat behind a massive mahogany desk, her hands clasped, her expression unreadable. "Ilara," she began, her voice a low, resonant hum. "The situation has become dire. Vance Enterprises is on the precipice. We have exhausted every avenue, every last resource.